Hello and welcome. How compatible is Islam with the secular lifestyle of the West? Some conservative Muslim scholars argue that the two conflict, but our guest today has been campaigning for greater integration. Swiss-born Tariq Ramadan describes himself as a Muslim reformer and has called on Muslims in Europe and America to embrace Western culture rather than reject it. But for more than half a decade, he's been banned from visiting the United States because the Bush administration accused him of donating to Hamas-linked charities. After the current US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton personally intervened to lift the restriction, Tariq Ramadan was able to visit for the first time since 2004. Civil rights advocates are calling his return a triumph for freedom of speech. Opponents maintain that Ramadan is an extremist in sheep's clothing who secretly backs an Islamic revolution in Europe. His visit comes at a time of rising Islamophobia in Europe, with both Belgium and France proposing laws to ban face veils in public, and after last year's vote in Switzerland to forbid the building of minarets. So today we ask what can be done to improve the growing gap between Islam and liberal secular democracies. Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or an email, and we welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me now is Tariq Ramadan, Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University and President of the European Muslim Network, a Brussels-based think tank. In his latest book, What I Believe, Dr. Ramadan seeks to clarify his beliefs, which have often been called controversial. I welcome you to the show.
Thank you for your invitation.
Well, first of all, I guess welcome back to America. And what do you sense has changed in the 6 years since you were able to come?
Look, I first came 2 weeks ago, and then I was following, in fact, what was happening in the country because, talking about Western Muslims is quite important. It's quite clear that before September 11, something was different in the whole, even within the Muslim communities, to tell you the truth, the discourse, the perception and the vision. And now I think that after the Bush administration area is something which is, people are hoping for something which is new and a new understanding, new discourse. And this is the right time to be here.
Why did Secretary of State Hillary Clinton intervene to lift that ban on your travel to the US?
Because it was ridiculous from the starting point. To be banned from the Bush administration was not, a dishonor for me, because I was very critical of, the policies in the Middle East and in Afghanistan and in Iraq. I was saying all these are mistakes. You are doing something which is completely wrong in the relationship with the Muslim majority countries, but also with Muslims. And then, that I gave money before the Homeland Security blacklisted the organization was ridiculous. So we are just coming back to a more reasonable approach as for the relationship with Muslims and Muslim majority countries as well.
Now, it's interesting to note, of course, because you are outspoken, it's not just America that banned you. You've been banned in other countries. There are other places you can't travel. Yes,
the point is that this is just to prove that I have the same discourse wherever I go, because I was banned from the States, but I'm also till now, I'm banned from Egypt, from Syria, from Saudi Arabia. These are countries where I cannot go because I'm also critical and saying to the Muslims, stop blaming the others. We have to be critical, and these regimes are problematic.
How do you regard your controversial image, the fact people see you as controversial?
I like the way the philosopher Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher, was describing what I'm trying to do. He said, Tariq Ramadan is not a controversial figure. He doesn't have an ambiguous speech. He has a clear stand between two ambiguous worlds. In the Muslim majority countries, this is just very difficult to be self-critical. And in the West, if we are not supporting, the policies, it's as well your loyalty is questioned. My loyalty is not questioned. I'm loyal to the future of our living together by being critical. There is no loyalty but critical loyalty. This is where I stand. So to be controversial now, to tell you the truth, Islam is controversial. So to be an outspoken Muslim is just to accept to be controversial.
I'm going to go on to some of those issues in just a second, but I have to ask you, because a lot of people traveling into the US worry about the experience at the US border. How were you treated when you came in?
The first time, they just took me 2 hours asking questions about what are you going to say and where are you going to speak. And I said, after entering, I hope that the next time it will not be the same, that just come enter. And this is exactly what happened. 3 minutes just to go through the security measures and all these things. So I think that it's improving. It's good.
Now, when Barack Obama was elected president, of course, and that's been since you were out of the country, one of the first things he did was to reach out to people, especially the Muslim world. He could see the gap that had been created during the Bush administration's time. But you say that Barack Obama could do better in translating his speeches into action. Where has he failed on his promises?
I think that first we shouldn't be naive, to change policies, to change visions, and also to enforce and to implement all this. It's quite difficult. So I'm not in a hurry, but still, the first speech he gave, targeting or towards the Muslim majority country, but not only towards the Americans, by saying, look, Islam is an American religion, and American citizens and Muslim American citizens are American and they are contributing. This is all fine. Now what we want is, we're all expecting something about Guantanamo. This is one thing. About Iraq, about Afghanistan, foreign policy, but not only. When it comes to what is happening within, when it's still, we have people who are in jail with no reason. We have security measures. We have, still laws and decisions that are enforced in this country. This is not justice. It's still the Bush administration era. We want this to be just removed, lifted. So with me as a symbol, that's fine, but I'm not the only one. Lots of people, more anonymous, more ordinary Muslims, are facing today treatments that are not justifiable, and I think that this should change.
Now, one of the big discussions that have come up in recent years is the difference between Muslims in America and those in Europe, and there's been a lot of spotlight in Europe on Muslims now as well. What do you see as the biggest difference between American Muslims and European Muslims?
First, we should not essentialize. There are differences, but they are very common, challenges. So the first thing is just the great majority of the Muslims coming in Europe are coming from economic exile, very modest background, not really knowledgeable about Islam. It was like a culture. So for them to remain a Muslim means to remain a Muslim as in the countries of origin. You had immigrants coming in the States who are much more knowledgeable, educated people, and they had a quick vision that, okay, we can take from the American culture, still remain Muslims, which was not easy for people with a modest background, not so much educated. So this is something which is quite important. But now, if you come to the social issues and you compare this to African American Muslims, because the Muslims in the States, it's not only about immigrants who have money and now they are living in the suburbs of the the inner cities. What is going on in the inner cities? This is where you can compare. And you can say to the Europeans, stop Islamizing the socio-economic problems. It's a question of class. It's a question of class segregation. This could be compared to what the African American Muslims are facing today.
A very interesting point, and I've heard you talk about this before, the Islamization of problems, that Europe is basically deferring its responsibilities and blaming Islam for the problems.
Yes, look what is happening. You were talking in your introduction about what is going on in Belgium and what is going on in France, talking about the burqa, 2,000 women, and they say this is a controversy, and then we go for someone who is just stopped in the street because she's driving with a burqa and say this is unlawful, and it becomes a national controversy. This is not the problem we are facing. We are facing discrimination on the job market. We are facing discrimination on housing. We are facing racism, and we are facing something which has to do with, everything which is, the European governments, they should reconcile themselves with true policy and politics, and not to just come to emotional politics and to follow in the footsteps of the populist parties. And in the Netherlands, in France, in Belgium, in Denmark, this is what we are facing. So I would say that this is something which is very worrying in the atmosphere that we have in Europe today.
You describe yourself as Muslim by religion and European by culture, and I wonder how you balance that being faithful to your religious practices, and then on the other hand having to deal with living in a Western culture and Western environment where often there seems to be conflict between the two.
Look, this is it. I started to write on this, and I wrote a book. This was 15 years ago, to be a European Muslim, trying to find where are the conflicts, and it's not true. The flexibility of the Islamic tradition with the latitude that we have in the European or the Western legal system, we can find our way, and we are fine. In fact, if we rely on facts and figures, millions of Muslims are American Muslims, European Muslims, and they abide by the law. And what I'm saying, we need the 3 L's. And this is what I'm advocating in the last book, what I believe. The first one is to abide by the law. And we abide by the law. To know the language of the country. We speak English, you and me now, and we speak English as Americans, or we speak the European languages. And the third is loyalty to our country. But loyalty, as I said, we should not have to prove our loyalty to the country. If I'm critical towards the American policy, or the foreign policy, or the British foreign policy, or the French foreign, it's not because I'm not a citizen. This is the way I just show to the people that I'm truly loyal to my country, because I'm supporting the good, I'm resisting to what I think is bad.
So the conflict we're talking about is not such religious or sort of moral, it's a political conflict.
It's political, and what we are expecting from the government is just apply the law equally, and not use the ideological perception of the law to protect yourself from your new citizens. Now, Islam is a European religion, is an American religion, and your citizens are Muslim by religion and European by culture, French, British, American by nationality, and there is no problem. Don't try to create a problem where there is no problem. Come to the real problems, and this is about justice, socio-economic issues, and to be able to say to the American government administration or to any European governments what you are doing in Muslim majority countries promoting democracy by going to kill innocent people and civilians. That's wrong.
Let me squeeze in an email before we take a break here. Now, this came from Abdullah Khan, a viewer who wrote in saying, keeping the war on terror and extremism out of it, why has Europe not been as welcoming towards Islam as it has been to other faiths? Why is there a mistrust or a fear of Islam? Now, of course, you mentioned, I mentioned at the beginning Belgium and France and the hijab and the veil, the issue of the minarets in the country where you were born, actually, in Switzerland. And I wonder how that issue is coming up, as our viewers says, why is there such a mistrust and fear now?
Because it's the same as in the States. There is a great deal of mistrust and fears. Why? Because for many reasons. We are now facing a double identity crisis. The European countries are facing an identity crisis about who they are. It's not because of Islam, it's because of globalization. Now there is something else which is quite important. There is no economic survival for any European country, as well as the States, without immigrants. So we know that we need them, but we resist their culture and their religion. So it's a conflict. And then the third thing, which is important, is the new visibility. I'm coming from a country where we have only 4 minarets, and they are asking now to, and they voted for that. It's banned. Why? Because the new visibility is as if, oh, they are colonizing us, they are coming. So we are saying, no, we are integrated, we are at home. So don't take it as colonization, take it as positive, proactive coexistence. We are also a gift for the country, not only a problem. This is something which is important. Add to this violence, violent extremism, and all this. This is nurturing a state of fear and mistrust. And the Muslims should be very respectful, understanding that their fellow citizens are scared and they have to respond to this. By resisting the populist parties very clearly, we are not going to follow in the footsteps of this instrumentalization of emotional politics, but responding to our fellow citizens because we respect their fear, we understand where it's coming from.
Dr. Ramadan, more questions for you in just a moment. We're going to take a very short break here. We'll have more of this discussion when we return. Welcome back. We're looking at the relationship between Western culture and Islam and how the two coexist. I'm joined by Tariq Ramadan, Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University and President of the European Muslim Network, a Brussels-based think tank. Dr. Ramadan, a couple of issues that have come up in recent years that really have also, I guess, enhanced the fear of Islam and the reaction of the extremists in the religion. A minority, of course, but with a major impact, it seems. Recently, South Park, an American cartoon, portrayed religious figures, including the Prophet Muhammad, as a teddy bear in this case. We've had the issue of the Danish cartoons. When we look at issues such as the South Park cartoon, the issues of the Danish cartoons, and the reaction, the divisions it's causing, what is needed from the Muslim side to be able to step back?
I think we have to understand where we live and what is the surrounding culture. If I'm saying that I'm a Western Muslim, I should understand the way it goes in my country. And this is why from the beginning, when we had this discussion on the Danish cartoon, I said to the Muslim, take an intellectual critical distance. Don't react emotionally. And say, we don't like it, but it's legal. Go ahead if you want to do this. And let the people understand where your sensitivity lies. But that's it, and then don't react. But to tell you the truth, if you go to what happened, if you just listen or just try to understand what happened in Europe with the cartoon issue, and then what happened also with the movie of Get Wilders in the Netherlands. Fitna. The reaction of the European Muslims was very good. They said, no, we are not going to follow you. We are not going to react to this provocation. So from the West, from within, the reaction was good. What was instrumentalized in many Muslim majority countries to say, okay, look, the West is against us. So we have a responsibility in the States to say, okay, we don't like it, but okay, that's fine. This is the culture, the surrounding culture. You laugh at all the religions. We are not going to follow this. We don't like it, but our reaction is wise, open-minded. We are ready to talk about it, and you also have to understand that it hurts us just to be treated like this. But if you want to go ahead, go ahead. It's legal, it may be silly, but this is the way we go. And I think that this wisdom is necessary, and this is a great responsibility of Western Muslims. If we want to be also connecting this to Muslim majority countries and not to let this being instrumentalized, what we need is more democratization in the Muslim majority countries, not instrumentalization of our tension here just to prove that what they are doing is right there.
Don't give them a weapon, in
Exactly.
effect. Yeah. Now, we had one of our regular viewers, Richard Wehe, said a couple of interesting comments in one of his emails, and here's one of them. It came in talking about Islam. It says, I think in Islam, the veil is a symbol of separation from society. How separated can one be in public places, regardless of how you are dressed? And has the veil outlived its usefulness? And I wonder to what degree the Western world should have to accept the practices of communities and cultures that come in.
I think it's a very deep question, and on this we have to be quite clear. As a Muslim, and as a Muslim wherever I am, in the West or in Muslim majority countries, I have to take a very clear stand. It's a question of freedom. We cannot impose on women to wear the headscarf or the veil. The headscarf is the right way. And it cannot be, we cannot impose onto her to take it off. This should be a personal decision. When it's a personal decision, you should be able to work, you should be able to speak, you should be able to be visible. It's a question of freedom. It's a question of personal decision. But the Muslim should be quite clear. We are not going to accept any society, any community imposing onto the woman to go for this. Because the headscarf, spiritually, it's a liberation process. It's to work on your ego and to say what is inside is much more important than what you see. So this is why we have to come. This is the discussion that we need to have, and it should be personal. It's an act of faith. And in the West, the Western countries, it should be also quite clear. And this is why I think that the message that the President Barack Obama sent to the French, no one can impose onto the woman the way she should be dressed, is something which is quite important. So it's not only to accept, it's to understand the deep spiritual message in it. And the Muslim woman here should be quite vocal. They should be able to articulate a discourse coming from spirituality to a visible presence within society.
How difficult is it for you to get across this message you're trying to when there's so much confusion between culture and religion?
This is the starting point. If we speak about Western Muslims, this is where I started with the book To Be a European Muslim. So the first point is really to start what is religious and what is cultural. And this is where we have some problems on the question of women, for example, and culture and the way we deal with things.
So this is the gap between what Islam says and what Muslims think.
Exactly. This is the point, and this is where, I put it very simply, but it's quite complex. There is no religion without culture. There is no culture without religion, but religion is not culture. So we need to build up, and this is the work I have been trying to do for the last 25 years, to be faithful to the Islamic principles, but to take from the surrounding culture. There are many things in the American culture or the European culture that are more Islamic than in the cultures of origin, Asian, Arab. This is something which is quite important. We shouldn't remain Arabs to be good Muslims. And this is why I say to the converts, don't try to Arabize yourself, to Pakistanize yourself, to Asianize yourself. Just be yourself with your culture, take what is good and promote what is good from within. So try to have a blossoming multiple identities. This is the way forward.
Now, of course, it's interesting in America, where there's a strong Christian culture and there's a sense of, in many cases, supremacy associated with that Christian culture. Richard Wehe, again, our viewer sent in this also in his email, and it asks about this. Christianity allows for the supremacy of the state on earth. How does Islam reconcile the existence of a secular state tolerating multiple religions and claiming supreme and final authority in its domain?
It's a good question, because Muslims should reassess their understanding of the secular system. They were looking at the secular system from a historical experience in the Muslim majority countries. And secularism in the Muslim majority countries was not about freedom and was not about being in a pluralistic society. It was about, all the regimes that supported the secular system were dictatorships. It was about no religion, and even sometimes the translation into Arabic was la diniya, no religion at all. So it was a historical experience. You come here now in the West, in America, and you understand that this was a way to separate, to distinguish between authorities, to help you to live as a good Muslim, as a good Christian, as a good Jew, whatever you want. So we have to reassess this. We don't have a problem with this law. We don't have a problem with this separation. More than that, that even, what I'm saying from the classical Islamic tradition, the separation of authority, what is due to God, and the way you deal with the authority on earth, there are two different things. So you can rely on your religion and your ethics just to try to find a way, but you don't deal with the human authority the way you deal with, for example, the ibadat, the anything which has to do with worship. So we are not at all in conflict with this if we understand the very essence of what a secular system is and the very essence of the Islamic tradition. The point is that Orientalists were sending a message: Muslims cannot deal with it. And some Muslims repeated that. And we are creating this conflict or this opposition. When you assess this in a deeper way, you understand that we can find our way in these societies.
Now, of course, hopefully your job is a little easier coming in and out of the US, having this ban lifted. But I wonder, of course, perception is a huge issue, and you're from a very prominent religious family. Your grandfather, Hassan al-Banna, was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Your father, Saeed, was also very prominent. And you've been pressured a few times to disavow yourself from their sort of legacy. Why haven't you done that?
Because I'm not going to do this, because what is said about them is wrong. I got here, and I came here the last time I came, and I was saying, oh, he was supporting Nazism. I said, what are you talking about? I got the books, and I wrote about this. He was saying that fascism and Nazism are distortion of wrong nationalism in Europe, and he was not supporting at all this. So we come with people who are quoting him in the wrong way. My point is, I'm dealing with him and all this tradition exactly as with any historical character or figure, and say, I'm contextualizing. I'm trying to say what he did against British colonization, what he did to support education in the country. I'm supporting this. Now, the way he was dealing with one organization at that time in the 30s and the 40s, I'm distancing myself from the means and even some of the objectives. I'm not dealing in the same environment. So I'm asking the people, don't judge me by proxy, come to what I'm writing, and then we have a serious discussion.
Well, Tariq Ramadan, I wish you an easier passage in and out of the US in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook, where you can catch past episodes and exchange views with our global audience. You can also give us feedback on the topics and post questions and comments. On the next show, a multi-billion-dollar dam project in the Amazon rainforest threatens the environment and indigenous tribes. But Brazil insists it's essential for the country's progress. Oscar-winning director James Cameron took a trip to the region and saw comparisons with the story of his blockbuster movie Avatar. Where does progress supersede human rights? Tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.